Hello dear learners, I am Professor M. Masoom Raza, Department of Library Information Science, AMU Aligarh. In the previous lecture, we have discussed different techniques of budgeting. I told you about the budgeting, what are the advantages and disadvantages of budgeting, and we have also discussed few techniques of budgeting along with their advantage and disadvantage. So we'll continue with the same. So in this lecture, I'll be covering the rest of the techniques. We have already covered line item or incremental budgeting, covered formula budgeting, program budgeting. I also told you about the lump sum budgeting, which I have not listed here, but I told you what are the advantages of the lump sum budgeting. And now I'll be telling you about the performance budgeting. So the performance budgeting is almost similar to the program budgeting. But here the focus shifts from program to performance. Only the difference is here the focus will change. Earlier the focus was program and now the focus will be performance. And emphasizing on the efficiency and effectiveness of the activities. That is more important here. And simply rather than solely considering the nature of the program, this method bases expenditure decision on the actual performance of various activities within the organization. In a library might focus on allocating funds based on the expected outcome of specific activities. To implement performance budgeting, libraries need to systematically accumulate quantitative data on all activities over a specified period. Management techniques like cost-benefit analysis are utilized to evaluate performance and establish standards. For instance, data on the acquisition, classification, and cataloging of the books, as well as the actual man-hours required for processing tasks, are collected to determine the manpower and material needed. This method begins with the articulation of agency's objective, followed by a comprehensive exploration of alternative methods to achieve these objectives. Selection of the most suitable approach is then made based on the criteria such as effectiveness, efficiency, and cost-benefit analysis. Budgeting is calculated by multiplying the unit cost for specific operations by the anticipated volume of operations. So, one advantage of the performance budgeting is its focus on the service mission of the library, thereby highlighting the importance of operational efficiency. However, a significant challenge lies in quantifying service quality and activities. While this method measures quantity effectiveness, assessing quality, particularly in the monetary terms, proves to be difficult. Library budget allocation often does not directly correlate with user satisfaction, making it challenging to measure the benefits of library services in monetary terms. Moreover, working out budgets using performance budgeting can be complex due to the intricate interrelationships among costs of different operations and the non-linear variation of costs for every unit of output. This method also necessitates a thorough review of each operations annually by authorities, which may appear burdensome to some. For example, just suppose, one example I'll tell you about the collection development. The budget allocation based on the expected increase in the number of books added to the collection and usage statistics. So the focus, as I told you, the focus shifts to performance. And when the focus shifts to performance, You just imagine, based on the data, on the quantitative data, it can be easily worked out how much a person is able to classify or catalog a document in a year. And on that basis, if you start your activities, that for running this program or maybe for this particular performance, you require only so many people, because you will be collecting data from different libraries, and then you can justify that how many people will be required for managing so many books for both classification, cataloging, because just suppose a man working for 8 hours, so that is 8 man hours. And just suppose a man works for 25 days, roughly 25 days in a month. So 25 multiplied by 8. So it comes to 200 hours. So 200 man hours per month, just multiply by 1 year. So in 200 man hours, how much a person is capable of? So that has to be calculated, and literally and in quantitative terms, means how much a person is able to classify. For classifying maybe 3 titles, 4 titles, how much time a user is or a staff is taking. And if a staff is taking so much time in classification and cataloging of the documents or final preparation of the documents, so how many people will be required? Just suppose if we employ a person for 200 hours in a month, or maybe 200 multiplied by 12, it becomes 2400 hours. So if we are employing some person for 2400 hours, we have to find out what will be the work output. So that when you start quantifying things, it becomes very difficult. So in 2400 hours, if a person is not able to give the required number of books or the optimum number of books, which are as per the standard, which so many books should have been classified, should have been catalogued, means ultimately you are trying to be very calculative or mechanical in this sense, because it's a human tendency. So everything cannot be, the drawback is basically that everything cannot be mechanically calculated. So, and when you have certain programs, you have to be very mechanical, very mechanically this will evaluate the program, and then it will try to correlate the performance also. Another example, you can see information literacy instruction, just suppose. So what funds allocated based on the number of workshops is, just suppose you are planning to have this performance, how many the workshops you are planning, and the level of participation by the library users, how much the user will be participating. This is how the fund is calculated. Money is calculated and then only allocated to the libraries. For example, third, you can see the community outreach. The budget determined by the number of community events organized and the level of community engagements achieved. So this is how the performance budgeting is very strictly calculated on the basis of man hours, how many people for executing certain programs, and accordingly the budget is calculated, and then only it is allocated to the libraries. So it has got some advantage and some disadvantage. One is it is very, you can say, quantitative, and it doesn't take care of the qualitative aspects. So sometimes when you know that you are going to be quantified, your whole activity is going to be quantified, so then your library staff or the focus on the pattern, that also changes. So you are more interested in covering more patterns or trying to cover just as many patterns as possible, or you are trying to just finish off with the work of classification, cataloging, reference, because normally your efficiency is being calculated in terms of the number. How you do it and how your performance was and how effectively you were able to convince how much the user was satisfied, that is not the concern here. So there is a big drawback of this system. Then coming to the new system, that is planning, program, budgeting system. So this is again a quite old system, but more scientific. So this was first introduced in the United States Department of Defense in 1961 by Robert McNamara, who served as a Secretary of Defense. So this PPBS system combines basically budgeting with long-term planning and system analysis to align budget decision with organizational goals and objectives. It involves systematically analyzing alternative programs or the activities, assessing their cost and benefit, and then selecting the most effective and efficient option. Basically, the idea is that you can see here two words are more important: planning, programming. Means you are trying to club these two things. You have to plan all the programs. Planning the programs means you have to be very careful when you are enlisting the programs. When you are suggesting the programs, that time you have to be very careful, and you have to suggest at least two alternatives, three alternatives you have to give. Just suppose you want to run this program, how you can run this program. So at least try to give me three alternatives or two alternatives, bare minimum two alternatives you try to give me. How much, what will be the cost of alternative one, and what will be the cost of alternative two? So for every program, if you are giving me two alternatives or three alternatives with proper cost evaluation, means proper, after doing proper cost analysis, that okay, the program one, it can be achieved or it can be met by two modes. First mode is going to cost me this much, second mode is going to cost me this much, third mode is going to cost me this much. So it becomes easy for the management, it becomes easy for the authorities to pick up the most cost-effective way of doing a particular program. So just suppose if you just give me a list of 5 programs and every program is having 2 alternatives, I can choose the best option. Means the option which is going to be beneficial for maximum users, or which will have optimal impact, you can say. Which will have an optimal impact means it will give me good efficiency, it will give me good output, it will be cost beneficial also, and it will be cost effective also. So if any strategy, any alternative, any you can say alternate strategy can give me all these things, or I can accomplish my objective with the minimum expense. With the minimum expense, I am saying. So that is the right budgeting for me. So this is how it executes. So this PPBS basically emphasizes on planning and performance evaluation with a focus on achieving desired outcomes. And it requires a comprehensive understanding of organizational priorities and objectives, and may involve complex analytical techniques. So PPBS can also help ensure that the resources are allocated to activities that contribute most effectively to organization's success. But it may require significant time and effort to implement PPBS in the libraries. Then the next technique is zero-based budgeting. As you can see, this is also a very common budgeting technique, and this was developed by Peter Fire. And this ZBB, zero-based budgeting, it requires justifying every expenditure from the scratch, regardless of whether it was included in the previous budget. And each budget request is evaluated based on its merit and necessity, rather than simply continuing the past practices. Continuing the past practices, this is where I'm reflecting the line item. Line item was simply pick up the last year budget and just inflate by 10%, 5%, means whatever the inflation rate is, inflate by that percentage and submit it again. So you don't require any brainstorming, no change, and things will continue as it was. But in this case, in zero-based, this is a modern technique of budgeting where the emphasis is that every year you start fresh. The zero word is more important here. Zero means you have to start with zero. Every year you have to start with a zero and give proper justification for every program. So in PPBS you have seen planning for every program is important, and then you have to be very meticulous in planning. You have to give alternatives also. In ZBB or zero-based budgeting system, Here also, things are almost same. Things are almost same when I say means you have to plan altogether fresh. Every year you have to review. You are not supposed to review the last year budget, or you are not supposed to revisit the last year budget. Only what you can do is, according to the requirement of the library, and you just come out with the programs, and then justify the utility of these programs, and then tell me how it can be executed. What can be the two different ways for executing a particular program? You give me alternative 1, give me alternative 2, and then tell me how much it is going to cost you, and what will be the implication of strategy 1, what will be the implication of the strategy 2, how much is going to be beneficial, how much is going to be cost effective, and how much it is going to be cost efficient. You tell me all these things, and then when you submit it to the authorities, it becomes easy for the administrators or the managers to understand things and accordingly approve the budget. So that is a big advantage of the PS, and it promotes basically accountability and transparency in the budget decision, and can help identify areas for cost saving or reallocation of resources. However, this ZPS requires significant time and effort to implement, and it may face resistance from the stakeholders accustomed to traditional budgeting method, because those who are practicing the traditional budgeting system, it is going to be a new exercise every year. So probably they will resist. But anybody who is more innovative and wants to do something new for the organization will definitely go for the zero-based budgeting system, because it gives you a chance to plan every year altogether fresh, come out with the new programs, just devise the strategies, tell me the alternatives, and just you can see which is more efficient, which is more economical, which is more cost effective, and then do the cost benefit analysis, and then tell me that this is going to be good for the organization. It will be economical also, it will be most beneficial also. The collection development would be evaluated based on the library's current collection needs and usage pattern rather than historical trends. So this is you have to do for every program which you are running in the library, and altogether fresh. The next we can discuss the methods of financial estimation. In the beginning I told you that more prominently we have two methods. One is a per capita method, I told you. So in per capita method, this establishes a minimum amount per person as essential for providing the standard library services. So I give you the example of Dr. S. R. Ranganathan, way back in 1957, when he proposed on the per capita basis, what he suggested, that 15 rupees per student and 200 rupees per faculty member should be spent for the development of the libraries. And during the Kothari Commission, the Dr. D.S. Kothari, what he suggested, that it should be 25 rupees per student and 300 rupees per teacher should be spent for the development of libraries. So this is how estimation can be made, how much money has to be given to the organization or institution. This is how some estimate or some estimation can be done. So the second method I told you, that is proportionate. So the proportionate method is something like fixing certain percentage. So fixing certain percentage means, just suppose it has been fixed by various committees and commissions that certain percentage of the university's budget, total budget, or the education budget, or maybe the total institutional budget, should be spent for the development of libraries. So what the Kothari Commission suggested, that from 6.5 to 10% of the total budget which has been allocated to a particular institution, that should be spent for the development of libraries. And when he said 6.5 to 10 means, he gave a range that the new libraries or the new institutions, if the new institutions are setting up any library, and they should spend at least 10%. But if it is an old library, then you can go up to 6.5. So you can decide, if it is a well-established library, minimum is 6.5. 6.5 of the total budget should be spent, that should be allocated, or that amount has to be spent for the development of the libraries, which include all the activities, services, activities, collection development, and so many things. But if it is a new library, you can go up to 10%. So the range is 6.5 to 10. Maximum is 10 and the minimum is 6.5. So it depends what is the development process. If the library is well developed, you can go for 6.5. If it is in the stage of developing, you can go up to 10% also. So this is the range. And this type of system where we fix certain percentage, where that is called as proportional method. And sometimes this also works, because if you give a certain percentage, the institution, the higher authorities of the institution, they cannot do anything, they cannot curtail any amount from the library, and that much amount has to be spent, because ultimately they are also responsible to the government. So ultimately the institutional authorities, they will give you bare minimum 6.5, so that money can be utilized for the proper library development. And this is how the consistency can be maintained. There is third method, that is called method of details. The method of details involves accounting for all items of expenditure when preparing the financial estimate for the library. This includes salaries, wages, reading material, binding, repairing, heating, cooling, lighting, rents, interest, postal services, telegraph, telephone, stationery, and other miscellaneous items. So Dr. S.R. Ranganathan suggested that there can be two. One is recurring expenditure which refers to the ongoing cost that a library incurs regularly to maintain its operation and services. That can be salary, that can be acquisition of reading material, that can be utilities, that can be maintenance, that can be subscription to the licenses, that can be training and development. And the second category can be non-recurring expenditures. And these non-recurring expenditures refer to one-time or irregular costs that are not part of the library's regular operational expenses. The non-recurring expenditure requires careful planning and prioritization to ensure that funds are utilized effectively and in alignment with the library's strategic goal and priorities. The example can be capital investment, purchase of equipment, just suppose, or any emergency repairs, or for research and development. These can be few examples. So normally we have some budgetary norms also. So in the end, I'll tell you about the budgetary norms. So budgetary norms and the standards play a very crucial role in the financial planning and budgeting for the libraries. And these norms are established by professional experts, committees, and bodies to guide the estimation of funds required and the allocation of budget among different expenditure items. So you can see here, these are different heads. So out of these 5 most prominent heads, so what is the standard norm is that 50%. The 50% should be spent for the salaries and allowances. The 20% should, bare minimum at least, whatever your total budget is, 20% should be spent for the procurement of new books. Then periodicals, again, if it is a research library or academic library, then 13% should go for the acquisition of periodicals. And then bindings, or you can say that for the repair of the books or other material, you should spend 7% of the total budget. And last, you can see other expenses where the supply, maintenance, the cost of the electricity and all those things, cost of water, rent, all those things can be about 10%. So this is what is expected, that if any library has to spend as per the norms or as per the budgetary standards, so at least they should divide the total allocation under these categories. And in any case, the expenditure for the books should not go less than 20, periodical not less than 13, binding not less than 7, and other expenditures can be managed within 10%. And especially for the public libraries, the distribution of fund is similar, because for academic, periodicals are necessary, but in case of public libraries, probably magazines or the secondary magazines will be there, and or you can manage some other things in place of these periodicals. Just the focus on the salaries and allowances, followed by the allocation for the books and periodicals, binding and other expenses. So mostly the periodical libraries, also the expense will remain the same. And instead of research periodicals, you can go for the secondary periodicals, or little you can deviate that instead of periodicals, you can go for good number of books. You can increase from 20% to you can have 25%, and rest of the amount can be spent for facilities that can be done for the public libraries. So with this, I hope you understand the budgeting, what it is, why it is important for any institution, what are the advantages and disadvantages, and what are the techniques, and even the ways of financial estimation, and what are the existing norms or what are the standards whenever you plan your preparing your budget for the library or for any organization. It is these things you have to keep in mind, and you should keep in mind for preparing a good budget or preparing a scientific budget which is workable and which gives you good result. Thank you.